Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we're going to have Alan Watt here on. Hopefully we'll also get a cameo. We may be able to connect to VZ Lawton and to Lorraine Murray, who is an amazing presenter of our information. We have some links up in today's news talking about the depleted, not so depleted uranium, and I consider Lorraine the Lady Diana of not so depleted uranium DNA landmines. Very similar parallel, as Lady Diana suffered great persecution of the British Royals. Lorraine Murray has had physical harassment, tracking, everything's done. Her computer's been attacked, her materials when she tries to bring them across the border into Canada, but she is still persistent, and she is winning the war. In many states now, there are laws coming forward. She's exposed the poisoning by depleted uranium of Paradise in the Pahalakaloa testing range on the Big Island, Hawaii, and how this has spread toward the beautiful beaches of Hawaii, of the Kona coast. This is extremely deadly, very dangerous, genotoxic, neurotoxic, and globally an attack against the DNA consciousness of mankind. And so many things are coming, not only the weaponization of our food, the fluoridation of water, the preparation with the scalar pollution from cell phones and electronic base stations. All of these a final death throes of the end of this age. And they have a plan, the globalists have a planned future age, but the transition even to their minions is very painful, very messy, but they don't care. They consider themselves the keeper of the wisdoms. And of course, we're going to have a very wise speaker who's on here regularly, Alan Watt, today. Let's continue with the dialogue that was started on your Alex Jones interview a few days ago, where the globalists have a plan for us, and we must seek an alternate plan, Alan, for us to survive and thrive through the coming catastrophe that is about to come across and come upon not only us in North America, but the whole world.
Yes, there's no doubt about it. It's out in the open, really. It's been discussed and published from high-level sources to the public, and as always, they can publish their plans for a future which they're not kidding about. They do. You can count on them. They always try and pull off what they plan, and they don't give up. That's the other thing too. When you think you've beaten them at one little point, they go round it and come back again. So they plan a world where everyone is predictable, because only with predictability for every individual can they feel safe. And that's what totalitarianism has always been about, is making things predictable. And however, in this new system of electronic type surveillance from cradle to grave, they will feel far more secure when there's nothing we can do that isn't monitored by them. And they will bring us in for psychological evaluations if they suspect there's wrong think or wrong speak, or you're not quite politically correct. And they also expect all of the repercussions from the public who start to object about this, along with all the other things they have planned, like water rationing and food rationing and all the rest of it. So they've planned 30-odd years in advance on scenarios from think tanks for the Ministry of Defense, and published them, that they expect mass uprisings and flash mobs and situations where the governments will have to use neutron bombs on the public. This is all published from the highest levels.
Yeah, in fact, the neutron bomb thing is quite important, because as my work as a munitions forensic with the Oklahoma City Forensic Munitions Team that went from Colorado Springs to go to the Aurora building and come back, they had removed 2 unexploded micronukes. There was radioactive debris. They removed C4 pineapple, thermate, RDX, and high explosive cord. We have evidence of tritium at the World Trade Center complex. We had a great discussion, myself and Dr. Stephen E. Jones, about the scientific basis. Again, this is a scientific dialogue, not a conflict. And we're working hard to find out if there are other evidences of other types of layers of munitions, including the presence of 4th-generation micronukes. If they are not present, based on multiple sample testing, it supports even more Professor Jones' thermate alone, or super thermate, perhaps other types of high explosive munitions. And if they are present, it means thermate was present, plus the presence of nukes to destroy the core of the building. We're talking about a quarter-mile high of giant steel girders 47 4x4 giant steel girders going a quarter-mile high into the air, millions of tons of steel turned into literally a vapor, a atomic and small, tiny particle and nanoparticle-sized particles. A great deal of the building itself literally blown away. That's not in the debris pile, and even if you take into account the, say, 8 to 10 floors in the mall, you have to also account for that debris in terms of the total floors. And it should have been a third of the initial height of the building. Instead, it was less than 10%. So we have very significant and horrifically damning evidence that the globalists will stop at nothing, including their simulations of Virginia Harbor. The April 27th of the 100-kiloton nuke going off with national and international forces. Yesterday and Sunday, they, literally on Sunday when I was literally speaking in Vancouver, I got material from Fred Schwartz in Philadelphia that they had 50,000 homes delivered with a box with a U.S. Postal Service worker and a Philadelphia policeman armed, presenting a box with, of course, obviously the program is take the shots or get shot. And we're talking about totalitarianism. You cannot refuse these. The president passing presidential edicts. The Supreme Court now passing literally a Bush versus the U.S. Constitution decision last week that the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights are no longer relevant in terms of the war on terror, and Bush therefore has a carte blanche, says the emperor and his edicts are the final arbiter of justice. There is no such thing as due process or renditions can grab you and take you now. So all they need is the final events of a disaster of any nature, and he can, by personal decree without any consultation, set up a total police state instantly. So, yeah, Alan, this is pretty bad, isn't it?
It's bad, but it's already here, in fact. See, all this stuff is just more dressing on what was already here. It took them many, many years to prepare all the terrorist bills and the future they were going to create. It took them a long time to prepare that, long before 9/11. 9/11 was the essential thing to pull it off, to introduce it. And they've made as many covert jokes in the past about 2001 would be the kickoff for the new system. And lo and behold, they win the giant lotto and they get their wish. And they can go forward with their great plan to take over the Middle East and standardize them as well. So it took a long, long time to bring this off. And Eisenhower warned about it through the military-industrial complex. People don't realize that the biggest private corporations are not private at all, especially in the areas of technology. They're CIA-sponsored and run because they don't let private organizations come up with new equipment and technology and sell it to the public without their okay. And they always said that technology and science would win the Cold War. Well, they didn't suddenly stop that after the Cold War. You find Hitachi and all the big boys are now in the business of microchips, etc. And that's no coincidence because they've all been funded. All the big companies are all one big company at the top. And that's why the CEOs can go from one corporation to the next and take all the supposed secrets with them. In a real-life situation, if they're all independent, you couldn't walk off from Sony, walk into another place, a competitor, and take your 50 years planning with you to your supposed enemy. They're all one at the top.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, the whole idea that somehow they're separate is not true. I spoke 3.5 years ago to a Sony executive flying back from to New York City from Denver, and he was saying, well, I said, well, what's new? We're sitting up in first class because I get a lot of extra air miles, and he was saying, well, we've got this new micro laser supercomputer laptop that doesn't require electricity. It's all on these micro lasers, so that's really interesting. I said, because I have a senior NSA contact that was there in 1947 when they set up the NSA, who was a cryptographer in the Second World War, and he had a supercomputer laptop with a plasma screen in 1962 with fiber optic, with micro lasers and or not circuits, because I've advanced technical training in some of these areas, and I explained to them exactly how they built it. And he says, there's no way you could have known this stuff. I said, well, the reason why I know it is that these technologies were leaked to these corporations, just like the NSA is an industrial spy agency for the good of the global corporatist organizations. That's what they do. Amazing, isn't it?
It's the name of the game. They have all power. Don't let you have it for free.
Exactly.
They want to make sure they decide.
Welcome back to the the Nutrimedical Report, our special guest, Alan Watt. Alan, tell us how we can plan an alternate future, a future that is not one where there's a vast reduction in human population, where they've turned us into biological machines with predictability, a future where they've destroyed human lifespan down to 30 years or less, a future where they plan on destroying literally the spiritual connection to our body, a future where they've destroyed the DNA and our ability to reproduce except in a laboratory. These futures are what they plan. These are a predator class, and I think that because we don't resist their actions, we prove that we are indeed their cannon fodder for wars, their body parts places, and they're those who they can recruit upward into their ranks if we're sufficiently twisted and evil like they are to do their will.
Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. It isn't just that you have a class at the top of psychopathic inbred dynasties. It's also that they have so many helpers all through the different strata of society in all countries. And that's a problem that's never been addressed, really. You see, you have as many psychopaths in every class system as you do at the top. They come out spontaneously, some of them. However, the ones at the top are pretty well guaranteed because the male and the female have long lineages of psychopathy. But we do see them propping up down the ladder too, and these are the guys who become the shock troops and the special forces and the cops and the guys who do torturing. And the saddest thing is we're looking at a situation today where there's no lack of recruits to do the torturing in these countries in the 21st century.
No, there isn't. In fact, the setting up of 80 prisons at Kellogg, Brown and Root and Halliburton Corporation, the setting up of 100 civil detention death camps, work-to-rule camps, work-to-live camps, like they have the moniker over the top of the German Nazi death camps. Yep. 2 camps of 1 million, 1 camp of 2.5 million, camps in Canada for American citizens. I personally visited one in 1983. These are real, they're palpable, they're present, and they're across many administrations. So if we want to say it's the Democrats, it's the Republicans, how about it's anyone who gets to the top? That's why they try to put people out that are very viable candidates like President Ron Paul. They want to put Big Sister in, and they're doing everything they can to completely discredit or disconnect the public from really getting a proper dialogue of who and what options they have. They're giving us 2 different, the devil we know and the devil we don't know. Well, Big Sister, I think, is even going to be worse than Bush, if that's possible.
Yeah, well, they generally will put a female in when they're going to give you the hardest time. They've done this down through history with Bloody Mary and different ones, because they don't really like women much at the top. So they always give you one that you won't like when you're going to go through a horror show. And this is just all propped up for the public, because I don't even talk about the political game because I have no faith in it whatsoever. It's a joke. It always was a joke. It's totally contrived. The candidates are vetted from university onwards for their whole careers to make sure they're trustworthy, and they play the game for the public. We must get beyond this game, because the big boys who are above the politicians already have. They've decided our future for us while we watch the Punch and Judy show of politics. We've got to get above the wrestling match here, because that's all it is. It's a wrestling match for public consumption. And we're sitting playing the band here of politics while the Titanic is sinking, and we're on the deck. So we've got to stop it and get off in another way, because this system is designed to collapse. The big boys have made it so. And the people down below still want to retain the old system, which was never theirs in the first place. This was never our system. And since I've been born, this is a completely artificially ordered system. There's nothing humane in this system. It's a system where money and greed and power dictates what success is. And there's nothing humane in that. When people get dumped on the street, mental hospitals get closed down, and patients are just thrown out onto the city streets. What's humane about that? What's humane about a system that dumps people who have legs amputated, or children, as third-class citizens because they're not productive anymore? Right. Well, who wants to keep this inhumane, productive system of being a good consumer producer who pays taxes to keep this elite system going? Not me.
No, exactly. And see, this is the real issue, is that no one in this system is basically fit for destruction, so that they are ready to tear it down, because it's just like the Tower of Babel. And I was reading an interesting article while I was flying back and forth to Denver and out to Vancouver, that we are literally seeing the builders of the Tower of Babel plan its destruction, which is why they knocked down the Twin Towers, which are the same Supras towers before the tower, before the Temple of Solomon, which are in the Hebrew...
Jachin and Boaz. Jachin and Boaz of the same old thing for ancient times.
Right, and Jachin Boaz is, I shall restore in strength, which means those that build up shall also tear down, and those that the cross on the front of the Knights Templar, the Knights of Malta, which run this world, the corporatists, is the galactic cross of the ancient keepers of the knowledge, to pass from one civilization as it ends to start another. And that's what they're doing. They're getting ready to call the population to do all these things because they're ready to create a new civilization on the ashes of the old. The ceremony of Pahanuk, the ancient ceremony of Sumer, the ceremonies that go back to ancient Atlantis and before, that they have done throughout the ages, and this is not the same time. This particular disaster that's pending is going to be much more cataclysmic and much more determined we have to be, that we're not going to let these overlords of death and destruction, the worshippers of the death's head, run us over the edge of a cliff again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as I say, I mean, Revelations to me is just a big long business plan from ancient times.
Oh, of course it is.
And everything that they predict in that, it's not prediction actually, it's not a prophecy, it's a revelation, it's a revealing, it's a plan. And everything that can be they put in there can be done scientifically today, every darn thing, with no exceptions.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. So they followed that to the letter. They knew they could do it because it's true enough. They have archives of real history, not little public libraries for public consumption. So they know the formats, they know the procedures. It's all simply sequences like mathematics, and they know what they can introduce at one time in the past can be reintroduced again, and the public will follow that format through their logical system. It's all known in the archives, and these characters really know they've brought us to the end of this road, and they're bringing it into the new age. A few will come through, according to them, the ones that they select, and the rest will be killed off. And that's why you have all these gene-specific bacterial and viral warfare projects on the go, which have been publicly disclosed in the newspapers in Britain.
Right. In fact, they've moved all of the bioweapons that the Russians had to American and Canadian laboratories. They don't have proper biosafety protections. They know we have XMDR-TB, the ultra-drug-resistant tuberculosis. We've got the avian flu. They've weaponized many other plagues. These are all going to be played out in the next years. That's why they plan on doing this. And people say, no, that's too extreme. They wouldn't do that. Human beings wouldn't do that. These are not the normal strain of human beings as you know humans are.
And these are the guys who literally planned world wars.
Right.
And to them, this is the third one, the third and final, the Trinity. You see, so the third one, we're in it now.
Yeah, exactly. It's already started. Literally, the start of the final, if you want to call it the shot at the start of the race, was 9/11. And the warm-up was Oklahoma City. We're into it. This is not a theory. This is a reality. We'll strip back more Cutting Through the Matrix, which is a website for Alan Watt, cuttingthroughthematrix.com. Do get his materials if you want to know what's going on. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome to the Nutrimedical Report. Our special guest today, Alan Watt. And you have 3 volumes. Volume 1, The Androgynous Hermaphroditic Agenda. Cutting Through, number 2, A Glimpse into the Great Work. And number 3, Esoteric Unveiled and the Meaning of Revelations in Higher Masonic Tradition. This will explain, when people see this, it'll be, if you want to call it the deep roots of what's going on. If people see the book Codex Magica by Tex Mars, that can see the hand signs, but this is the geopolitical, all the signs that are embedded into our culture that show all the universities, all the political systems, all the medical schools, all the law schools, all of the organizations of all the corporations are completely and thoroughly Masonic, and all of them are subservient in this rising pyramid of evil that is planning the end of the age and planning the transition to a new world order. And many of their minions will be eliminated as the brown shirts as they transition through this cataclysm, which they have planned. That's why the long count was known by the Mayans. And I don't like the Mayan civilization. It's a bloodthirsty civilization, but their astronomers and the elite there, just as the elites in our country, are really no different. They're really no different. We want to think we're so wonderful because we don't decapitate people on the high steps, but yes, they do. They put depleted uranium and poison and salt the lands of Kosovo, of Iraq and Afghanistan. They send millions of our young men and women to be polluted by vaccines and depleted uranium. They destroy nations and worlds. They divert money away from health care and natural wellness into toxic drugs. Literally, they will not repent, and as it says, like in the Bible, of their pharmakia in Revelation 9. This is very obvious. They have a plan to kill, steal, and destroy, and it's going step by step, like a Deutsch step, directly over the cliff of our end of our age.
Yeah, it is, and as I say, they know it because they planned it. That's why they break down eons of time into ages. And India is even more specific because they have much longer histories and all of this. And they have about 7 previous ages that they have in their records. The old Druids, according to Tacitus, who recorded the Druid religion for Nero, when the Romans went into Britain, claimed the Druids, said there were 3 that they had on their records, 3 previous ages. So these are just eons of time.
Right. So you think even things like the Trilogy of the Ring is not supposed to have been just a theoretical study. It's an actual study in the nature of control of civilizations down through history. So that's one of the reasons why people are organically attracted to the Trilogy of the Ring, because when this was written, it was based on historical fact, not on something that was abstracted just in the imagination of one individual.
Yes, and it also had, under the guise of elves and pixies and fairies and so on, the different classes of humans, as they call it, because they have us all classified into certain categories.
Right.
So in allegorical form, which is pretty typical of what they do.
Yeah, and they also try to create those, which is why the lords would not properly feed their people. And from the 12th century, the height of the average person in Middle England dropped from 6'1" down to 5 foot 2 inches, because they malnourished them on purpose to create the different
They're doing
class.
the same now. That's what's so amazing about this, watching this, is they've gone after the entire protein supply of the planet. Even the ministries of agriculture, apart from all the foods they've altered, and the cattle and pigs and so on, by putting human genes in the pigs and tampering heavily with the cattle. They've also, I watched one from the Canadian Ministry of Fisheries, our tax money again hard at work, and they were literally injecting altered DNA attached to E. coli. They use E. coli to insufflate basically this particular gene right into the fish. They're taking the fish out of the lakes, altering them, putting them back into the lakes, and that gene eventually replicates itself through the entire fish. So they're going after the entire...
Yeah, they're actually trying to change our DNA too. It's not just changing the fish. When they put scalar pollution out there, we know that, for example, when they convert the air to a plasma with barium salts and aluminum, they can actually send scalar signals that epigenetically can switch on and off your genes. They can insert into your thought set or experiences or emotions like fear. They can actually change the genetics of crops and other things. And Morgellons disease is a scalar pathogenic pollutant. It literally is introduced, just like we had Lyme disease, which is a bioweapon. This is a new class of pathogens that is a scalar DNA epigenetic controller. It literally controls or changes or switches on and off, and then generates even new DNA sequences by controlling the cells. This is the extent to which they will go, and they will use technologies that we don't even think in our wildest imagination exist.
And also, there was a program special here on the public broadcasting one rainy Sunday I watched, and it was about the World Wildlife Fund they have ARCs. They call them ARCs, which are big cryogenic laboratories where they have stored the genes of every original plant, animal, and insect on the planet, and have 3 worldwide, which they say they will keep in case of world catastrophe.
Yeah, they have one up, and I heard it in
all the altered stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, they have this ARC. I've seen one actually in a cave system in Norway. So they've got them prepared. They're literally ready to destroy the life on Earth. I had an interesting argument with a professor of chemistry when I gave my presentation. Nikola Tesla, over almost a century ago now, basically said that before Marie Curie discovered radium, and of course they discovered polonium and all these other radioisotopes, he stated very categorically, Nikola Tesla, that it was very simple for him to use scalar technologies to convert radioactive to non-radioactive materials. And this is not just a chemical change, it's an actual change to cause a rapid degradation of radioisotopes so that it would not be radioactive. You can be determined if they released a pollutant like this, that at the same time they must have also have a technology to neutralize it, so when it's spreading worldwide they can cleanse the earth. And they have these technologies before they release it, just like the avian flu or Lyme disease or any other pathogen.
Yes, and it's the old Star Trek stuff of reseeding the planet.
Yeah, it's terraforming.
Yeah.
Terraforming the earth. In fact, I call it the reptilianization of our planet, the serpentization. And of course we know of the Luciferians as the serpent class. They consider themselves the only humans, and the word "hue" is Welsh word for serpent. And that's why the Magna Carta was not written for the commoners, because they were not allowed to own property, only the lords, and only they quote humans. People have appropriated the term for everybody that belongs to mankind, but in fact in British common law, and the basis for all the common law of all the nations from India to Russia to America and Canada, it is based on human rights, which means those are of the serpent class. Mm-hmm. And so the British Authorized Registry, or the Bar Association of the Lawyers, they are one step below a knight and one step above a gentleman. And that's the reality. The reality is the Queen and the royals and all of the others are still in firm control, and they have now reabsorbed America into the fold.
Yeah, and they did it a long time ago. That's just it, too. Right. Very cleverly and slowly and carefully. Yeah.
Yeah, so tell us more about this alternate future. How do we make a choice and move forward with actual actions that will give us an alternate, Alan?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no magic wand to please everyone, because as you know, a lot of people, an awful lot, maybe even the majority of the public, will go to the bitter end of this road, trying to keep hold of it even as they're sinking. It's all they know. And unfortunately, it's all a lot of them want to know. You cannot save everyone on this planet. And what we have to do is start to reevaluate what it is to be truly all human in the real sense, and humane in the real sense, and what our new values should be, natural values, instead of this shark-infested system they call democracy or civilization. This is not civilized.
No.
This is a degradation of the spirit.
Right.
It doesn't lift anything up at all.
Yeah, even during the decency of battle in the Middle Ages, people would go off and have their honey mead, and they would go and stay in the same inns, and there was some degree of decorum. There were not the destruction of civilian populations. What we see now is literally an absolute disregard for civilian populations and the daily discourse of international corporations poisoning us, and the attacking and destruction of millions of citizens in Iraq, Afghanistan, and now a planned nuclear attack against the population of Iran. This is an abomination. It is a degradation of society and morals publicly and of our leaders down through the ages that is going to culminate in the termination of the leading class. Their days are numbered. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and our special guest has been Alan Watt, who will be on regularly, because without a very sharp intellectual mind cutting through this understanding of this dialectic of confusion, because the average menial mind would say, no one would do that. They wouldn't be both doing good and evil. They wouldn't be setting up this dialectic of balkanization and confusion. So at every level, even up to the university levels, you only have access to 4% of the total database in the public arena. That 96% is on a need-to-know basis controlled by the globalists. They are the keepers of the, quote, sacred knowledge, and they consider the rest of us profane. And with the rise of the internet, with the rise of the education system, many of us are becoming aware, which is why they're in a panic to poison us with weaponized food from the World Trade Organization, to spray our food with sulfuryl fluoride, to bathe us in electromagnetic scalar pollution, and to destroy our future. And literally, their attack is against consciousness and our DNA. It's against our autonomy and us as a sentient cognitive being. And their plan is to destroy that future. So we do have a plan for an alternative. Please give us a summary of some of the steps we can take, Alan, to kind of start looking at an alternative future to what they're planning.
We have to, each one of us has to decide individually what life is all about, or supposed to be about, or should be about.
Right.
And it isn't just buying and selling and profiting and getting to the top. That's the same old system.
Right.
That's all we live for, is some kind of reward and approval by the elite. You're back into the same loop. We have to get a different way, another way completely. And we must also find ways to recognize the deviants within society, the psychopathic types, that simply will start the whole thing all over again. We must also demand, and this is a demand, we must demand that all of those who get positions over us in legal format and positions in politicians, anyone who can make any rule or law affecting us that we supposedly vote in or they serve us, these servants must be given the psychopathic test to make sure that they're ordinary people and not psychopathically inclined. That's a must-be, because
absolutely,
most of them are psychopaths. That's just
it seems to rise and to become more psychopathic. We have Mary Ann in Arkansas. Your question for Alan Watt or myself? Go ahead.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Dr. Deagle. Deagle, as always, I appreciate you, what you're doing so much. If my people which are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, I will hear from heaven and heal their land. And there has been a tremendous call for fasting and prayer. Bob Schultz at WeThePeopleFoundation.org has called for June the 1st to be a national day of fasting and prayer. And I want to read one scripture from Jeremiah. If you will remain in the land, then I will build you and not pull you down. I will plant you and not pluck you up, for I relent concerning the disaster I have brought unto you. I'm hopeful that God will hear our cry and deliver us from the hand of the enemy.
Yeah, we're in a very desperate time, and as I say, the ultimate answers are going to be spiritual. I happen to be a Messianic believer. I really think that prayer is very important. It brings us back to basics. We aren't always clutching and grabbing at the next thing we can buy or the next thing we can consume. We start to connect to living things around us, like the beauty of the forests or a good walk on the beach. We start to think about other fellow human beings in other countries, and the idea that we need to be strong but independent nations that can help, because you can't give what you don't have. And if your nation has been impoverished, like they are planning by bringing in an uncontrolled immigration into America, they'll impoverish it and bring it down to a second world status that'll have no dispensable wealth except that in the hands of the globalist billionaires. And that's what they want to do. They don't want to have an independent people who fear the Most High God, who want to do the right thing, who aren't, quote, religious, but they're more spiritual, and they really do care about their fellow man and other living things in their planet. That's what needs to happen. And you're right, prayer is absolutely essential for people to get back to the basics.
I think what they have to do too.
Yeah, thank you.
I think what they have to do too is realize it's not just for the land; it's for the lands, because you reap what you sow, and you can't be furnishing the people to go over and cause dissension in other lands without expecting it to come back home.
Absolutely.
That's the other key to it as well. Most people want to save their own little hemisphere or little place or home. And we've got to stop thinking like this, because what we do to others will be done to us just the same.
Yeah, it's a simple process. You know, people can call it the law of the universe. I consider it, judgment. I mean, you do these things, eventually it comes back. You see people, they steal things, they get things stolen from them. They do evil, and evil comes upon them. It's basically the way the universe works and the way judgment works. And the globalist leaders that have consumed our populations, that have literally bought and sold people and souls, have destroyed the health of people, have crushed down the profession, so doctors are afraid to speak out when they know that they don't know what they're doing. They know this. They know that they haven't read the product inserts when they're giving vaccines. They know that these drugs are dangerous. And now more and more physicians are realizing that neither the drug companies nor the regulatory boards nor the medical schools will protect them when they're finally sued for the sins of their mentor drug companies or medical schools for what they did. And this goes on and on. It's in every single profession. We see it in industry. We ship industries to China. They pollute us, and the pollution blows back in California. We wonder why the people are choking, not just from car exhaust, from pollution from industry we ship there. Well, we also impoverish the public, and they don't have jobs. We need to realize it's the end of the road. We can no longer say, if we just can go home and rest and watch our television and have our beer, we'll be fine. It's not going to work anymore. We're at the end of this age. We're at the end of this period of history. It's not the end of the world, but we have to choose an alternate future, and it requires action and sweat.
Yeah, and it does take a real big mind shift to get away from the old paradigm of me, my family, mine, and realize that we're all concerned here. It concerns everyone across the whole planet.
Right.
And we can't play their warring games anymore because they supply the leaders to every side, and they always have.
Yeah, like Hamid Karzai, the UNICAL executive, is now the president of Afghanistan. Of course, they met in Crawford, Texas, and said to the Taliban, we set you up, we gave you arms to fight the Russians, and now we can decide to carpet your nation with depleted uranium or with gold. What shall it be? And I guess because they were destroying the crop of heroin that the MI6 and the globalists want to spread around the world for $1 trillion, they decided to carpet them with depleted uranium and destroy the genetics of their children and cause them to have birth defects to crush their nation like they have done to Iraq. And again, they crush Babylon so they can build Babylon up. So we can see the rise of Babylon in the very plans of America and the globalists while you see them destroy it.
And you also find a lot of, even if the Bibles in the West are censored, and they have been censored with each publication done through the centuries.
Sure they have. That's why you have to get...
You find old Psalms that have been removed where they talked about those who came through from the previous civilization. And if you read the old Hebrew texts, you'll find that they were hunted down by the people in the deserts and they ran and lived in caves, and that's why they started all over again with secret signs and passwords to recognize each other and start the whole thing all over again.
Right, and in fact, they have sequentially, step by step, that's why they've inbred, that's why they've maintained these signs, they've changed their names. That's why when you look at the pictures and statues of Nero, if you go to the Louvre or you go to Italy, you'll see Nero looks exactly like Bill Clinton. You say, that's really strange. It shouldn't be strange. They're the same bloodlines. If you look at George Bush and Bill Clinton, they are related on 8 sides in their family trees.
And many of the pharaohs of Egypt, we know this because we found their wigs in their tombs. They were red-haired or blonde-haired, as were some of the kings and queens of Sumer. So, and they wore the black wigs that came from the ordinary people's hair around them to disguise themselves. So yeah, these characters have been around for a long, long time.
It's so bizarre, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's just so bizarre and we have now caught on. We have got you. You shall not escape our grasp. You shall not, and we'll even recruit among your own, because what they're doing is they're trying to tell the police and the military, oh, you're safe, just do our will, and we've got a nice future and a nice fat pension. No, they have a mass grave. In fact, the first to go are those at the upper echelons that are supporting the capstone. The first to go are the police and military, because they plan on replacing them with cyborg, super soldiers that are part human. They plan on replacing with UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and remote-operated vehicles. And they plan on culling the population. They're the first, not the last on the menu. Alan, you've done an amazing analysis. So we need to choose an alternative future, become first aware, read the materials, get them, support Alan, go to cuttingthroughthematrix.com. Literally cutting through the matrix. You need to know this material if you want to have an alternative future, but you're the master of your own fate. Thank you, Alan.
It's a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Do stand up and speak out, because if you don't, you will be silenced forever.
Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we're going to have Alan Watt here on. Hopefully we'll also get a cameo. We may be able to connect to VZ Lawton and to Lorraine Murray, who is an amazing presenter of our information. We have some links up in today's news talking about the depleted, not so depleted uranium, and I consider Lorraine the Lady Diana of not so depleted uranium DNA landmines. Very similar parallel, as Lady Diana suffered great persecution of the British Royals. Lorraine Murray has had physical harassment, tracking, everything's done. Her computer's been attacked, her materials when she tries to bring them across the border into Canada, but she is still persistent, and she is winning the war. In many states now, there are laws coming forward. She's exposed the poisoning by depleted uranium of Paradise in the Hakaloa testing range on the Big Island, Hawaii, and how this has spread toward the beautiful beaches of Hawaii, of the Kona coast. This is extremely deadly, very dangerous, genotoxic, neurotoxic, and globally an attack against the DNA. Millions of tons of steel turned into literally a vapor, a atomic and small tiny particle and nanoparticle sized particles. A great deal of the building itself literally blown away. That's not in the debris pile, and even if you take into account the, say, 8 to 10 floors in the mall, you have to also account for that debris in terms of the total floors. And it should have been a third of the initial height of the building. Instead, it was less than 10%. So we have very significant and horrifically damning evidence that the globalists will stop at nothing, including their simulations of Virginia Harbor, the April 27th of the 100-kiloton nuke going off with national and international forces. Yesterday and Sunday, they, literally on Sunday when I was literally speaking in Vancouver, I got material from Fred Schwartz in Philadelphia that they had 50,000 homes delivered with a box with a U.S. Postal Service worker and a Philadelphia policeman armed, presenting a box with, of course, obviously the program is take the shots or get shot. And we're talking about totalitarianism. You cannot refuse these. The president passing presidential edicts, the Supreme
plan, and they don't give up. That's the other thing too. When you think you've beaten them at one little point, they go round it and come back again. So they plan a world where everyone is predictable, because only with predictability for every individual can they feel safe. And that's what totalitarianism has always been about, is making things predictable. And however, in this new system of electronic type surveillance from cradle to grave, they will feel far more secure when there's nothing we can do that isn't monitored by them. And they will bring us in for psychological evaluations if they suspect there's wrong think or wrong speak, or you're not quite politically correct. And they also expect all of the repercussions from the public who start to object about this, along with all the other things they have planned, like water rationing and food rationing and all the rest of it. So they've planned 30-odd years in advance on scenarios from think tanks for the Ministry of Defense and published them, that they expect mass uprisings and flash mobs and situations where the government's
consciousness of mankind. And so many things are coming, not only the weaponization of our food, the fluoridation of water, the preparation with the scalar pollution from cell phones and electronic base stations, all of these a final death throes of the end of this age. And they have a plan, the globalists have a planned future age, but the transition even to their minions is very painful, very messy, but they don't care. They consider themselves the keeper of the wisdoms. And of course, we're going to have a very wise speaker who's on here regularly, Alan Watt, today. Let's continue with the dialogue that was started on your Alex Jones interview a few days ago, where the globalists have a plan for us, and we must seek an alternate plan, Alan, for us to survive and thrive through the coming catastrophe that is about to come across and come upon not only us in North America, but the whole world.
Yes, there's no doubt about it. It's out in the open, really. It's been discussed and published from high-level sources to the public, and as always, they can publish their plans for a future which they're not kidding about. They do. You can count on them. They always try and pull off what they will have to use neutron bombs on the public. This is all published from the highest levels.
Yeah, in fact, the neutron bomb thing is quite important, because as my work as a munitions forensic with the Oklahoma City Forensic Munitions Team that went from Colorado Springs to go to the Aurora building and come back, they had removed 2 unexploded micronukes. There was radioactive debris. They removed C4 pineapple, thermate, RDX, and high explosive cord. We have evidence of tritium at the World Trade Center complex. We had a great discussion, myself and Dr. Stephen E. Jones, about the scientific basis. Again, this is a scientific dialogue, not a conflict. And we're working hard to find out if there are other evidences of other types of layers of munitions, including the presence of 4th-generation micronukes. If they are not present, based on multiple sample testing, it supports even more Professor Jones' thermate alone, or super thermate, perhaps other types of high explosive munitions. And if they are present, it means thermate was present plus the presence of nukes to destroy the core of the building. We're talking about a quarter-mile high of giant steel girders, 47 4x4 giant steel girders going a quarter-mile high into the air.